Across Russia, air defense was going off and air raid sirens were ringing. The population today is realizing that the war has come home to them. Just look at Ukraine's attack on Novorossiysk. Now, as you know, Novorossiysk is Russia's main Black Sea base after Sevastopol. But there, Russian outlets report that air defense was forced to fire across the region in order to prevent the Ukrainian attack. So, though the drones that Ukraine sent did not destroy the Russian military, they did destroy something else. And that is the sense of calm, the sense of peace within Russia. And not just for the military, but for everybody in the country. So first, of course, we can assume that no harbor is safe. That means that the harbor, such as the one in Novorossiysk, the one that is used to host the ships that fire missiles on Ukrainian cities, well, now it has extra security precautions. But those extra barriers, those extra escorts, they slow down the daily fleet work. They make it harder for the Russians to operate. But that fear, that shock, moved from the sea to the shore, and authorities across the country tried to react. They tried to tell their population, you are now in danger, but to do it in a way that they would not panic. For instance, in Krasnodar, they simply raised the drone alert. In Sochi, they cleared off the bases and told the people to go home. But cities from east to west are now trying to prepare for the idea that at any moment, Ukrainian drones might soon arrive, which is probably quite shocking for the Russians. The country that launched a 3-day special military operation to invade their neighbor is now on the defensive. It is now very clear that Russia is losing. My name is Jason Smart. I am a special correspondent for the Kiev Post, and I happen to also be a national security advisor. But what we see inside of Russia, what's so interesting about it, is not just the attacks. The attacks, of course, are interesting to watch. They have a military value and a social value. They also have an economic value. But there is something more. They are having a political value. We see changes in the Kremlin. We see the fact that people in the Kremlin seem to be worried. They seem to realize that things are not going well. And that supports an argument we've heard for a while, that within the Kremlin, the conflict between those who wish to keep fighting and those who wish to wrap this up soon is becoming more and more heated, because Vladimir Putin seems intent on continuing this war. Vladimir Putin, of course, is receiving a lot of nonsense, false information. He has soothsayers and advisors who are really just yes men. So it's perhaps true that he does not even know that across Russia, factories and energy sites are being struck. Look at the UAV plant in Vluki. It was hit and there was a massive fire thereafter. Or look at the petrochemical complex in Bashkortostan. It was struck and then it burned. 2 oil pumping stations in Volgograd, they've also been damaged. We saw the recent strikes in Astrakhan. That cut gas processing and key materials came to a halt. Across Russia, more and more, we see Ukraine is attacking key facilities. And more, we see in Russian Telegram that the population is shocked. They had not anticipated when this war began that Russia could lose, which is probably a good lesson. Don't start a war unless you're sure you can win it. But they chose to invade Ukraine, and today the consequences are catching up with them. Today they are feeling the pain for their own decisions. Look at the shortages we see across Russia of fuel. The fuel problems have now spread not just in the central part of the country, not just in Crimea, but to the very core regions of Russia. Moscow as well as St. Petersburg regions are reporting more and more troubles at the stations. Less and less fuel. More pumps are empty and the people are standing in lines for hours trying to get gasoline. And as we've discussed, what's important about this is not just for the common consumer. The average Russian does not own a car. It's far more expensive than what they could ever hope to afford. However, they do eat food, and they do need to buy basic goods. But food and basic goods typically are transported by truck. But trucks now are paying more for gas. And the more that they pay, the less profit there is, which means they increase the prices more. And this is while inflation in Russia continues to worsen, which means that they are paying more and they have less money to spend, and the money's own value has even less value than it did the day before. The situation in Russia is actually quite complicated, and that is very good, because the more complex it gets for the Russians, the harder it is for them to pay for basic things, the harder it is for them to justify spending millions of dollars a day to wage war against Ukraine. But there's something else. These attacks on the refineries have been very expensive to fix, because it's not simply the structures that have to be rebuilt. It's the fact that Russia does not have the parts necessary to rebuild them. In many cases, they were built with Western parts. And so, though there is a black market and Russia can eventually get most things at once, it becomes far more expensive, far more of an investment of both time and money to fix these things, these refineries. But the other attacks that Ukraine is carrying out are also having their positive impact. Think about these damaged pumping stations. With them being damaged, it means that the fuel can no longer be moved to the demand centers. Less processing and blocked movements means empty pumps, which means the cars slow down, the army trucks slow down, and the Russian soldiers are not transported. All of it moves in a circle. All of these things are interrelated. The Russian economy, the Russian military, and the Russian political situation are all directly connected to each other. So let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at exactly what is going on, why it's so interesting, and why the recent moves inside the Kremlin are shocking people. But first, do me one favor. Help me get the word of what this channel is about to more people. This channel is about supporting Ukraine by getting the truth of the situation inside Ukraine and what's really happening inside of Russia, the country that is losing this war. The way that you can help me in this effort to support Ukraine is to please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and consider becoming a channel member today. So let's take a look at some of these decisions of what's going on now inside the Kremlin that have so many people talking, so many people curious as to what will happen next. Let's look at Dmitry Kozak. So Dmitry Kozak was removed from the presidential administration. He had been a long timer there. He was thought to be close to Putin. He was also thought to be sort of open-minded as far as speaking with the president. I should say the dictator. He would at times give his actual opinion and not just say, yes, I agree, which is part of the reason that Putin has problems. He's surrounded by people who are yes men, soothsayers, and others who just want to get close to him. They're not interested in doing what's best for Russia. They're interested in protecting their power, in playing the politics of court. But either way, Dmitry Kozak, he was removed. Now, he was known to be a serious negotiator, but at this point, his clashes with his colleagues, those who want to continue the war and not negotiate, was said to be getting worse and worse. And in fact, the silence surrounding his dismissal, that does in fact suggest that it was politics that got him fired, not routine staffing. But his exit also serves as a warning to all the other insiders that if they don't fall in line, they don't get behind Putin on the need to continue invading, that they too would be dismissed. And this is creating tension. And we know it's creating tension because Putin now has directly contradicted people in his own circle about the situation in the country, about the economy, which is directly related to the war. Everybody realizes if you wish to improve the economy, the first stop would be to end the war. But he can't do that. He wishes to continue this. But he's become very frustrated. The military continuously disappoints him. They had promised a 3-day special military operation, but now they cannot say that they are any closer to that. But they can say that they have allowed Russia to be invaded. Look at the recent situation with General Valery Gerasimov. Now, Gerasimov, who's the head of the Russian military, he recently did not appear next to Putin at a major drill. That's actually very unusual for Russia. Typically, someone like Gerasimov would be right next to Putin. One, he wants to assert his power, to show how very close he is to the dictator. But when he's not next to him, that's not his decision. That's Putin's decision. And that typically means that there's a reshuffle at works, or maybe an investigation. Keep in mind, the FSB is currently going after the Russian military. But at this point, it signals trouble. There's no other way to read it. Someone like Gerasimov would always be with Putin, and if he's not, what's really behind this? Well, given the recent timing, the fact that 16 Russian generals from their military have been arrested since 2022, the fact that Shoigu, the former Minister of Defense, who was a close personal friend of Putin, was also dismissed last year, and that his deputy is now in jail for 13 years for corruption, are all indications that perhaps the military is in a very bad situation. Perhaps the military is on the receiving end of a purge. But this would be par for the course. In Russian history, this had happened before, and it's not surprising. But there is something that Russian history teaches us. When you have large-scale purges across the country, it's actually not very good. It turns out badly for the country. But Vladimir Putin is not very concerned by that. It seems that he will continue with his purges. And that means that the Russian military will be ever more disadvantaged. So on one side, they have purges. They have a leadership that is shaken, that is scared, that's worried, is not sure what will happen. And those are the people in charge of calming a population that feels just the same, and that's not sure what is happening right now in Russia. So the best thing they can do is to put more restrictions, to put more safety measures. But that means that there's going to be slower, more defensive positions, but there's going to be more and more barriers, so it'll be more and more difficult for Russia to operate, even domestically. But the harder it gets for Russia, the better it is for everybody. Already we've seen that they are too slow to react to things, that they are unable to react to rapid changes on the battlefield. But now that every general is becoming increasingly concerned that perhaps they're being investigated, perhaps they too will end up in jail, they're unlikely to take any risk. They're unlikely to do anything novel or different or unique, because why would you? Why would you possibly stick your neck out if you know it will only get you in trouble? The best thing you can do, as any bureaucrat will tell you, is to put your head in the sand, to check off the boxes, to do exactly what's asked, and nothing more. But Russia can't afford that. Russia will lose the war if this continues. Look at the massive attacks across Russia in the sphere of hacking, for instance. Russia now is being routinely hacked, and massive troves of data are coming out that are sensitive to the state. And the government can do nothing about it. And these are not one-offs. These are continuing. So what does it mean together? What are all these different things together? The drone attack in Novorossiysk at the naval base, the fuel shortages across Russia, the attacks on the drone factories, the attack on the petrochemical factories, the attacks on the refineries, the hacking across Russia, the FSB arrest of the Russian generals, the firing of senior leaders close to Putin. What does this all mean together? Well, I think it's very hard to make a cohesive argument, a serious argument, that Russia is doing fine. There is not one indicator, not economic, not political, not social, that things are going well inside of Russia. In fact, all the data would suggest that things are very bad and getting worse. Which leads me to another thing. If you would like to help things get worse for the Russians, I will pin in the first comment below a means by which you can help donate for drones. As you know, we've been fundraising for quite a while now, and we will continue to do so, because our drones are helping save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. And for those of you who have donated, I thank you. So when we look at the situation in Russia, let's consider something. When you see all the news that's come out of Ukraine in the past day, past 2 days, past 3 days, have you seen anything similar? Have you seen that there's mass shortages of fuel, or that the factories that are necessary for the economy of the nation to work are all being destroyed? Have you seen that their supply lines have been totally cut off? Have you seen that Ukraine is losing territory? Have you seen that Zelensky's senior leaders are getting fired? You've not seen that, because it's not happening. Ukraine is relatively stable compared to Russia. So though it seems fanciful, it seems impossible to believe, the situation in Russia truly is becoming untenable. It is truly out of control. And that is good news. Because every day that things get worse for the Kremlin, it means that we are yet one day closer to victory over evil. Thank you for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel. and consider becoming a channel member today. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.